Good morning. My name is Mike Balboni, and I have the privilege of being a trustee with the New York Power Authority, and I chair the Cyber and Physical Security Committee. We want to welcome my fellow members on the committee, John Comel, Eugene Nicandri, Tracy McGibbon, Anthony Presente, and Dennis Trainer. I'd like to welcome also the NYPA staff and members who are participating. And we have a special welcome to a special guest, General Keith Alexander. This committee was scheduled and duly noticed as required by the Open Meetings Law. And I'd like to call this regular meeting of the committee to order pursuant to Section B4 of the Cyber and Physical Security Committee Charter. We would begin with the adoption of the agenda. Ask whether the committee members have any amendments to the proposed agenda. No amendments, and I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Second. The motion passes and the committee agenda is adopted. I also like that the next portion of this meeting will be held in executive session. The meeting will resume in approximately 60 minutes. I would like to ask for a motion to conduct an executive session pursuant to Public Officers Law of the State of New York, Section 105, to discuss matters regarding public safety and security.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries, and we now go into executive session. Welcome back. I'd like to ask for a motion to resume the meeting in open session.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The motion carries. I would like to state also that there were no votes taken during the executive session. At this point in time, I'd like to ask Eric Myers, the Vice President, Chief Information Security Officer, to present the cybersecurity update.
Thank you. So I just want to share a brief update with you today regarding the widely reported SolarWinds issue that came to light in early December, and NYPA's response to it, and how we view the situation going forward. So first and foremost, I want to state that NYPA was not using one of the vulnerable versions of the SolarWinds software. Many companies were, but NYPA was not. However, as this situation was developing in early December, there was a lack of clarity around exactly which versions may or may not have been vulnerable. So in an abundance of caution, we took the action to shut down our instance of SolarWinds software and activate our backup monitoring capabilities. Concurrent with that, we immediately began a forensic hunting exercise to ensure that we didn't have any evidence of the related compromise in our environment, and found none. But we continue that to this date, and that's actually part of our ongoing cyber threat detection and monitoring capabilities. Looking beyond NYPA, we surveyed our supply chain partners just to ensure that if any of them had been using SolarWinds or vulnerable versions of it, that it wasn't going to pose a risk to NYPA. That activity is ongoing, and to date we've found no exposures here. And so we do continue to collaborate with our partners on threat intelligence and other behaviors that could help us understand this, what is still a developing situation. Now,
Eric, if I could just, can you give us an idea of the number, where we are percentage-wise of suppliers that we have reached out to? So that we can sort of judge, are we close to, have we, is it 80%? So we're pretty confident that nothing's been seen. So therefore,
yeah, let me defer to Vic Costanza to answer, because he's been running that process for us, so we can tell us how many we've received responses from and so forth.
Thanks, Eric. As Trustee McKibben, it's been about 80%. We've got 80 vendors that we've reached out to, and about 80% of them have responded, some of which have used SolarWinds, but none of which have reported a breach related to that.
thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So again, the important point here is that we've not observed any activity related to this incident anywhere within the NYPA ecosystem, but this won't be the last one of these things that industry faces as a supply chain issue. It wasn't the first either. So I'd like to do is just, if you just move to the next slide, just talk a little bit about our approach to mitigating the risk of these types of things. And that starts with a very robust zoned security architecture, which is really based upon some of the principles like such as zero trust and layered defense. If you want to think of an analogy, think of it as we're living in a gated community, and all of our homes in our gated community have high fences around them. And so even if somebody gets into our gated community that we don't necessarily like, they still have to get through our individual fences in our yards to get through our front door. And so that positions us to be able to, in the future, if we were to have another incident like this, where perhaps we did have a vulnerable version of the software in our environment and an adversary was able to get in, we can contain that and minimize the damage. But another important piece of this is we layer on top of that very robust monitoring and detection capabilities. We're looking for those unusual network behaviors that could tell us that somebody is in our environment and that they're trying to phone home or perhaps control things in our environment, looking for that unusual network traffic. And that's something that no organization can do on its own because we only have limited visibility to the overall threat landscape. And so that's why a key element of our program are the partners that we share intelligence and best practices with, industry organizations, vendors, state and federal authorities, and that we are continuing to expand and grow in that space. In fact, most recently, we just announced some work that we're about to do with the Army Cyber Institute to increase the threat hunting and detection skills in our own team. So again, more to come here, but I'm happy to report that we have not seen any adverse impacts in the NYPA environment from this most recent incident.
So, Eric, just following up on Trustee McKibben's point, you and I have had a discussion about how we could document the efforts that our partners, our vendor community, are making to ensure that they've taken the right steps to try to deal with this. So with the SolarWinds incident, and I think it's important to document it so that we have this not only for this moment, but what's important, I think, with SolarWinds is to understand that it's still happening. You know, the attack is not over. We may have discovered it in early December, but it's still going on. And one of the key provisions of this is that it moves laterally. So we're not sure truly, it's hard at this moment to define the affected universe. We know it's 18,000 are the initial numbers, but we may see more, may grow to other companies. So I chatted with you, and I would love to have the ability to document the steps that the vendor community that work with NYPA are doing to not only what they've done at this point backwards, but what they're going to do going forward.
Happy to do that. And another action we're taking is, again, we're going to survey our technology landscape and understand where we may have potential exposures. Where's the next SolarWinds going to come from? Where's the next major IT service provider that may be compromised? And if they did, what impact might that have on organizations like NYPA?
Great. Thank you.
Eric, question, Eric. Where do we stand with the munis and the co-ops as far as cybersecurity and stuff?
So we are building, and I'll let Vic chime in and provide a little more color there around some of the details. But again, one of the things that we're trying to do with some of our partners like IronNet is to build that network community sharing concept so that we have visibility across the New York State power ecosystem and can detect threats if something perhaps was to originate in one of those munis and co-ops.
Right, and we do keep an open dialogue with all of our munis and co-ops and meet with them. In light of these recent events, we did have a meeting with the SolarWinds threats and shared some of the best practices that they should be following, and many of them found that very helpful. So we'll continue that.
They all have the wherewithal to keep up with this rapidly changing landscape.
They do, and some asked for some additional tool sets, which we provided some low cost or free tool sets that could achieve that for them, and they were able to leverage those recommendations.
And I'll just add that being able to provide that level of support to the munis and co-ops and other statewide agencies is one of the things that we're trying to do with the COE concept that we've announced previously. So again, it's going to make those capabilities and skills available to organizations that might not have been able to afford them on their own.
Eric, what is COE?
The Center of Excellence, the partnership that we announced with Siemens.
Right. Just for the
I go
audience.
back to the third party and the supply chain. How confident are we that, stay with the judge's theme, that they have the wherewithal to do the appropriate diagnostic work? Our degree of confidence in ourselves is very high. Skeptical me says our third party vendors aren't as sophisticated as we are. Help me with your perspective on that and what we're otherwise doing to be either more proactive with the diagnostic work or more restrictive with those with whom we work, and how we've raised the bar in light of this that third-party vendors need to get over to be able to continue to do business with us.
Right. So we've taken a somewhat tiered approach there. First, we're looking at all the vendors that actually use SolarWinds products, looking to see if we have any that use the affected versions of that, and then zeroing in on those that may present some exposure to us. I'll let Vic chime in a little more if you'd like to get into some of this.
Sure. Yeah, and in addition to that, we do have cybersecurity terms and conditions that we append to every technology purchase, both bulk electric system related for NERC SIP, as well as other IT business related technology purchases. So there's a very strict set of criteria that they need to follow to ensure that they have a secure environment and that they're handling NYPA information securely before we even proceed with the procurement process and purchase order with those individuals. And then it's ongoing monitoring. We have BitSite to monitor the vendors of various security trends. And there's also restrictions in there and terms and conditions to tell them that they need to report a breach within 24 hours to us so that we could take action if there is such a breach on their systems.
Well, Vic, do we have the right, or have we done any of using the words here in the presentation on our own hunting and forensic monitoring of third-party systems, or are we relying on third parties to do their own hunting and forensic monitoring? That's all I'm trying to understand. There's part of me that's a bit uncomfortable. I appreciate Michael's point on documentation, but documenting inadequate procedures doesn't give me a whole lot of comfort. So what degree of confidence do we have that others with whom we do business have the appropriate level of sophistication, diagnostic tools, ongoing monitoring, et cetera?
Right. So one of the requirements with the third-party vendors is to ensure they have third-party certification of the security of their systems, whether it's SOC 2 certification, ISO 27001, or vulnerability assessments of their systems by a third party. If they do not, we ensure that that is done. Sometimes NYPA will conduct it for them to ensure before any procurement is finalized that we have that assurance that their system is secure. And then we also monitor ongoing any type of interactive connections that we have with those vendors, whether they're system connections or interactive user access, to ensure that if any risks show up, that we can easily respond and disable that access. And that also includes on the physical security side, if they have physical access to our facilities through the background check process and other ongoing awareness, that we disable access if there is any type of threat.
Yeah, so again, we wouldn't have the visibility to hunt in those partner networks. However, those that we have connectivity with, if there was some evidence that they had been compromised, we would potentially pick that up if we had any, with our monitoring at the point of interface where they would connect into NYPA.
And if I could also add too, keep in mind that prior to any award, we will run a risk analysis on the supplier. And part of that risk analysis, once they become a NYPA supplier in our Ariba system, we continually monitor the Ariba risk using the Ariba risk tool to see if any status changes. So we're doing that continually.
Okay, thank you.
Eric, anything else?
I think that's it.
Very good. Thank you for your presentation. This is obviously a growing area of concern. And so these types of discussions, and in addition to bringing in people who can help us contextualize the threat, very important best practice for us. So next item is to adopt a consent agenda, which consists of meeting minutes, and it is now before the committee for adoption. I'd like to have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So move.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The next meeting is July 27th, 2021. And with that, I'd like to ask for a motion to close this meeting.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The meeting is concluded. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.